Looks like we've got a good amount of attendees, so we're going to get started here today. Hi, everyone. My name is Greg Aperian, and I am the VP of Customer Experience here at Corbett. And I am joined here today by my friend and fellow internal communications thought leader, Pinaki Kathiari from Local Wisdom. He's the CEO of Local Wisdom. And before we get started, I just want to share a few logistics for this morning. First, you'll see at the bottom of your screen, of the GoToWebinar screen, there's a Q&A tab. We'd like to encourage you to add questions throughout. We'll answer either throughout or at the end of this, so please do that. Second, we're going to experiment and have a little interactive fun here today and do a few polls throughout. So if you wouldn't mind taking part of those polls and joining us as we trigger them. And lastly, everyone who's attending here will receive an email afterward with the webinar recording, and we, as we always do at Corbett, will post this on our website as well too. So with that, we thank you for joining us here today, and let's get started. Pinaki and I have both made a career in marketing and communications, and over the past decade, we've watched the world change, especially this last year, as you have too. The workplace has changed, employee expectations have changed, and today's discussion is a lot about the maturity and growth of internal communicators, and with all of this, internal communicators have changed. Yet, not all communicators themselves have changed. Many have made that jump to the modern communicator, but the greater amount have not necessarily jumped outside of their comfort zone yet for all sorts of reasons. And you might ask yourself, what is the modern communicator? And we're going to talk about that here today. But ultimately, that modern communicator skills range from data-driven and strategic to using a wide range of technology to reach and to target and to engage and measure communications. And you can then take these skills and use this to decentralize communications at your company, and you can enable your business to be driven through communications. And Pinaki and I have used this model many times over, and we have seen this transformation happen for our customers and are here today to show you your path to your comms transformation. Pinaki's company, Local Wisdom, has created a maturity model to help communicators assess your current skills, your capabilities, and to show you what a future state looks like, so that you can create a roadmap of actions to actually grow. So today we're gonna spend some time talking through all of this, introduce the model, talk about our experiences with customers and others using this to achieve personal, team, and business growth. So it is my pleasure here to introduce you to Pinaki.
Thank you so much, Greg, and thank you for having me and those kind words. I really miss speaking with you, and I'm so glad to be here. Hello, everybody. I'm Pinaki Kathiari. I'm the CEO of Local Wisdom and co-founder of Resource Hero. I've been in digital communications for over 20 years, and I think what you'll learn about me is I have experience and passion from like a wide range of areas, from creativity to technology, psychology, design, marketing, comms. I'm kind of all over the place, and I think that's because I really do get excited about bringing things and mashing up and mixing up ideas from different areas to create new solutions and new ideas, right? So my product Resource Hero is a 5-star rated app on Salesforce. It helps service managers make better data-driven decisions using resource forecasting and time tracking. And I'm here with my digital communications agency, Local Wisdom, and we've been in business for about 20 years now. And we specialize in empowering communicators, right? Because communications, I think we all know, it kind of feels like you're trying to swim upstream against a heavy current, right? And our job is to really help communicators build better boats and to help slow down that current so you all stay above water, right? Essentially, we do 3 things for communicators. We help them build and launch their digital communication platforms. We help them manage the communications content over them, and then we help them staff up if they really need to boost production volume. And essentially, one of my favorite parts of the job is basically I get to take the learnings that we get from our work and share that wisdom with the community. So I'm really happy to share that with you all today. And thank you again, Greg and Corbett, for doing this webinar and giving us all the opportunity to share this wisdom across the community.
Well, let's share our wisdom. Pinaki, you and I, over time, have worked with hundreds of communicators, right, and met many and had these discussions. So we have an excellent understanding of the struggles of the communicator, as well as the opportunities. Give us an idea, like what motivated you to create this maturity model?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think like a lot of times, like things just kind of come together in our heads, right? And I think that's the beauty of bringing aspects of different areas all in together. So I think it was at a time when we're redoing our mission statement at Local Wisdom, and so like our customer persona was like really in our minds, and actually at the same time like I was playing a video game, an open world video game, The Witcher 3. I think my wife and I watched the Netflix series with Henry Cavill on, and I said let's kind of just play this game because I like playing video games in my spare times. But if you've ever played an open world video game, I guess you could think about it like Minecraft or even the first Zelda game in Nintendo. It's kind of like you're plopped into this world. You may or may not know your full purpose, but you have so many options and so many ways to achieve success in the game. And and that can be overwhelming. And in video games, when you get stuck or you kind of don't know what to do, you can go online and find strategy guides and walkthroughs. And that made me think that there's no strategy guide for building an internal comms team or a service function like this. Because the way we saw internal communicators is they're a lot of times we're stuck in the zone of doing things that are important and urgent, right? Like managing and producing that day-to-day content demands of the business. And it gets difficult to step away and do things that are important but not urgent, like work on the strategy or the metrics or find out your overall business objectives, right? And sometimes, when we do have the time to like focus on these things, there's so many options and ways that we could approach it that we may or may not approach it in the most efficient way. And I think that's where it came to me, and that's where we created this model for any digital content production team to see where they are, envision where they want to go, and plot a course to get there. And I'm super excited to share it with you all today.
Yeah, I always like to sort of give the analogy and comparison. While not every company in the world has a marketing department, most do, right? And if you look back 10 plus years ago at marketing, while marketing kind of always had a seat at the table, it's always been data driven. And with the introduction of technology over the past decade or so, it became more data driven to the fact that they're predicting what consumers or customers are doing, right? So when you look at a marketing team today, they've got a multi-million-dollar budget. They're using data to drive their strategy and assess their results. Their teams are large, much larger than what communications looks like today, spread across different disciplines or expertise, from strategists to data analysts to all sorts of different types of specialized designers, engineers, media buyers. The list goes on. And I think the promise that we can give you is, comms can make this jump too. If marketing did it, comms can do it too, right? So we're going to talk in a moment about the two different types of communicator personas, but let's launch our first poll to see what you all think you might be, right? So I'm going to launch the first poll now. Let's take about 30 seconds, and it would be great if everyone could answer this poll. Give it a few more seconds here. So it looks like mostly everyone is responding here, and we're seeing some answers here where about 35% are calling yourselves common communicators and 65% are calling yourselves modern communicators. So it's great to know we've got a group of people here who understand this and even want to continue to grow here. Thanks for playing along, everybody. Let's talk a little bit about these two personas, right? You might say, what is the common communicator? And we'd like to sort of give our perspective and definition on that, and we'll do the same with the modern communicator. So Pinaki, how would you define the common persona?
Yeah, right on. It's whenever I kind of like speak to one for kind of ubiquitous for everyone in communications. I think what good I could say is that I always see good people who are really passionate about communications, and you see people who are really thinking about the overarching employee experience and trying to make a true difference in the business outcomes for their organization, right? The common persona has this kind of like area of overwhelmness to it, right? It's kind of, and it's mainly because it's a small team. Typically, we've seen it's kind of like one or a few people who are responsible for communicating to like thousands or tens of thousands or sometimes hundreds of thousands, and kind of the day-to-day churning that ever-changing needs of the business, just content and communications, and this kind of keeps them stuck into this kind of very reactive way of working. And I think that's the kind of like danger zone of like the common persona here. And, you know, it kind of also dawned on me, right, as you were talking about marketing and the technology, similarly with communications, right, with the advent of new technology, somehow now the communicator is also like this product manager for their comms technology stack and the user experience it delivers, right? So all of this kind of becomes overwhelming and limits them to being that true strategic force in the organization. And I think you see symptoms of that sometimes, right? With like when you don't have enough time to like focus on the strategy or really have efficient processes, or, you know, don't have time to like evolve like the capabilities of your team. Those are some of the things that I see. Is that kind of similar to what you see, Greg, or what are you seeing on your side?
It very much is. And if I sort of came at this from the same question, I would probably answer it more on a checklist, right? So I'll go through a few things that come to mind here. Not data driven, right? So you're not sending emails through an email platform that can measure open rates. So you don't even know if your messages are getting through when email is probably one of your primary ways of communicating. You and also don't know how your content's performing, right? You're more reactive in the way you're working versus strategic, right? Do you have a documented strategy? Have you enabled others with that strategy? I think that challenge of small team, it's rare to find a large team in internal communication. So that need to decentralize is really important, right? So again, documented strategy, governance, all the things that go along with that, and get other people throughout the organization to not necessarily be part of the communications department, but to extend communications, right, to different audiences, which also brings up, you know, right now most communicators are sending one message to all. So there's limited to no targeting. Maybe you're using distribution lists with email, but when you can send targeted, relevant content to people, you're all looking for engagement results. That's what activates people, you know, right? Giving them something that's relevant and meaningful to them. The whole capacity issue, right, I think comes down to, you know, you're always gonna have that small team, but how are you again leveraging decentralization so that, you know, you're less reactive, more strategic, and can fit everything into your schedule. I think a really key important in today's part of it too is that relationship with IT. We talked about that comparison to marketing. So marketers have technology specialists of all sorts on their team sharing strategy, sharing outcomes, when most comms are working with IT in some form of support nature versus a true partnership, right? So if your communications goals, you know, need to be achieved through technology, you know, time to sort of change the way that you structure that relationship with IT. And leadership. Leadership comms is one of the hardest things to accomplish, right? Not all leaders are comfortable communicating in modern ways like shooting videos on their phone, but getting leadership to buy into this, right? They don't necessarily have to be communicators all the time. They can participate, you know, in different ways. If you have a digital platform, if they're commenting and liking and sharing and getting involved in the conversation, that's good enough. So it obviously means to get their buy-in, right, then you get that seat at the table. And the reason marketing has that seat at the table is because they're coming at it from a data-driven way. So when you think about like that persona, if you know you need to be here, but you're not there, what's stopping you from getting there is the question.
Right. You know, it's funny, like too, it's also, I would like to say everybody, like for like this kind of common persona situation, it's not all like your fault either. Like there's so many environmental factors that kind of like put us into this state. But you know, we're all responsible for doing what we got to do and play the, you know, the cards that we're dealt with really well. And that's what we're here for. Help you kind of like figure out that and see how we can move on to future things.
Yeah, so hopefully between both of our definition there, you maybe that poll was correct, maybe it wasn't correct in terms of where you fit. But let's sort of give a little sneak peek here, Pinaki. Compared to that, what does the modern communicator look like? What does that new set of skills and capabilities and responsibility look like?
Yeah, I think like what I've noticed about some of like I think the I guess communicators that I look up to more, right? I think there's this kind of level of control when it comes to confronting situations fast, right? Because I think in the realms of communications, it's just like you just there's the everyday stuff, and then you're just tossed random stuff, and to be able to kind of control that in a comfortable way. Not to say that there's no stress involved, but that I think is some kind of like mark of a definition in my mind at least. And when I look at people who do that or can do that, I see some traits, right? Obviously, there's a concern over the overall people and the culture of the organization that they have, as well as the business outcomes that they're trying to achieve. So they're trying to balance the needs of both and creating communication channels across each. But in doing so, they're, I think, constantly learning new things, right? They're just from a technical or creative perspective or a leadership perspective, they're just kind of getting their hands into things and soaking up new stuff. And I think similar to what you said, Greg, like they're kind of mashing up things from like marketing and PR and journalism and social advocacy to kind of really create great, authentic content and content that moves people, not just gets views, is I think there. And in that way, they're a doer, but I think they're also like enablers, because one of my favorite things I hear from comms folks is how they enable others, where they train, they teach, they build templates and tools to help empower other people to be better communicators as well, because they're trying to bring other people along for the ride. And in that way, they become great relationship builders. I think same thing like you said, Greg, the ability to build relationships with like IT or HR or other areas of the organization are key. So I think there's this kind of like openness to build partnerships, because it's like you said, we're as a communicators, a lot of times it feels like you're outgunned. You are outgunned. So you need to create a posse, or you need to create, partnerships within the organization, right? And at the same time, I think Greg, sorry.
I said this is a team sport. It sure is.
Oh, sorry, say that again?
I'm saying it's a team sport. It takes, groups of people, right, to sort of pull this off in an organization and see those kind of results.
Yeah, it absolutely does, right? I always think of you as a modern communicator, Greg. What's it like being you?
Oh, thank you. I think that data-driven is the first. When you think of having a strategy, right, it's founded in goals and desired outcomes, right? So if you're just working reactively, then even if you could measure something, what are you measuring? So looking at your goals at a macro and micro level sort of lend itself to it. We've heard for far too long, I'm not measuring anything in communications. I don't know how to measure something. It takes technology to do this. Most of a shameless plug here, a platform like the Corbett Anywhere platform, right, allows you to do this. So when you can reach employees, in all sorts of different ways, through signage, through mobile, through desktop and web and internet and social, and the list goes on. All of that for them is just natural, right? It's this consumerized way of sort of, just the employee experience. And with that, then naturally comes this data back, right? In the form of I'm reaching everybody or a portion of them. I know which type of screen or device or channel they like best and prefer. I understand, the kind of content they like to view, more than the kind they like to engage with. So if you want to get that two-way conversation going, and you want comments, right, then you have to create content and encourage comments and have a method of curating conversations, right, to get that out of them, because this is new. So in some ways, the modern communicator has become much like the modern marketer, a content creator and a marketer. You're using a good mix of content formats, from videos and images and articles. It's not if you build it, they will come, right? So your communications, they need to become aware of what you're promoting, and it's this constant sort of parallel path of driving awareness and adoption of communications and workplace technology, And I think technology is sort of the nucleus to it all nowadays, right? So, HR has its, technology stack, sales has its stack, marketing has its stack, you need your stack, right? And you might say, what is my technology stack comprised of? Whether it's one solution that does it all or a combination, you need a good HR system, clean employee data, right? Because that employee data from their first name to last name to their alt ID to all the attributes like roles, departments, locations, tenures, that's what you're going to use for both targeting and delivering that relevance to them, as well as maybe reporting. You want to slice and dice your analytics based on locations and departments and et cetera. Email, you need to be able to know that those emails are getting through, right? And people are opening them. And there will still be, even with all other fun things like mobile and modern experiences, there's still going to be a portion who like email or email triggers the behavior to go look at something on mobile. Content creation and management tools. Do you have easy ways to create that content and publish it across all these different channels and endpoints? So you're not spending your whole day publishing across all your different tools. You're spending your day figuring out relevant content and strategy, right? And then again, the delivery of all that is technology's key to have one place to publish it and deliver that across all these different channels. And I think another big thing to think about is really that decentralization. So most communicators today are set up, maybe purposely, maybe not, in a command and control way, where you've got to double check if you're letting other people do stuff, grammar and brand and all this kind of stuff. But if you, to Pinaki's point, created a system of enablement, your style guide, your governance, all the pieces that tie to your strategy, and you onboard people and train them and meet with them regularly to help them understand, the goals you're trying to achieve, then let them go be an extension and publish, right? And once you've done that, right, this transformation has begun and this movement has begun. So I think the modern communicator really does require technology to achieve these goals.
Here it's making me think, Greg, like as far as the analogy between communicators and marketing, it reminds me of like years ago how like the customer experience or the customer journey became really big in the world of marketing in ways that marketing would wrap its messages around that journey. And I think that's what's happening in the realms of communications, right? Where we're seeing the employee experience and the employee journey, and how can we wrap our communications around that journey or make an optimal journey.
Exactly. Well, let's show you this model. Before we do, let's have some fun. Let's do another poll here that relates to it, right? So let's get ready for our second poll. Here it comes. We'll give you about 30 seconds to respond here. All right. So I'm going to close this out. It looks like most of you responded. Thank you. And based on attendance here, that most of you are in the 100 to 1,000 range there. About half of you are there. And I think you probably get the point here is that it's not easy. When Pinaki sort of hinted, there's almost at most organizations, one communicator to every 10,000 employees. So you really got to think about your system of scale here. So Pinaki, let's introduce the model here, right? And get to the heart of what we want to talk about here.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, I have a few slides. I think you have to give me presenter access.
I am doing that right now.
Got it. Boom, I'm in, and I'm going to share this presentation. All right, let me know if you can see that screen. As you see, just
I can
a
see
blank
it.
screen with, all right, on. So cool, yeah, so here's what it looks like, right? The maturity model here, right? I'm just essentially the model goes across 6 levels horizontally, and each level is defined by 5 layers. And the layers include workday, achievement, team, work volume, and business outcomes. And I'm going to go through each one of these really quickly just to kind of be able to zoom in and see what this is all about, right? So first is Workday, and Workday basically describes like a typical day in the life of, and includes kind of like the highs and lows and the wins and losses of what each level looks like. And right, so like in level 1, you have like 1 or 2 creative, passionate people who've been thrusted into the role, but it's also like a pandemonium of like tactical communications with poor or non-existent communication channels and internets and email platforms and such. But kind of like by level 3, we've gotten to a good rhythm of content and communications, and we're starting to shape how leadership and comms is working. And by like level 6, we have multiple comms teams and have achieved this somewhat decentralized model of corporate and local working together to drive business outcomes. The next layer is achievements, and achievements lists these 7 high-level milestones you need to achieve this kind of effective comms service, right? And they include defining a comms strategy, having a production process, having a proactive editorial calendar, having evolved your communication channels like your intranets or your digital signage or your email platforms, having consistency in design and tone and brand, being able to target content to specific audience segments, and being able to utilize the metrics to guide decisions, right? So you'll see like right in level 1, we haven't made any of these achievements because it's all kind of lighter color and with the X, but then by level 6, we've achieved all of them. Right? And so the framework essentially gives you an approach on like what to concentrate on as you kind of go level by level. So in level 1, you're working on your strategy and your production process. And in level 2, you've achieved them. And so you start beginning working on your editorial calendar and your communications channels. Right? The next layer is team. So the team lists 7 roles that are key to building and managing the function. The roles include comms director, comms manager, comms specialist, content strategist, writer, designer, and developer. And so, right, we've also included these kind of bar graphs underneath each one to show this full-time equivalent indicator, because you might not need a full-time person in this role in some cases, and in other cases, you might need more than one person for that role, depending on your situation, right? And one point to note here in teams is just because of this role doesn't mean that there's like one person doing one role, right? I think what we've seen is in earlier leveled groups, we see more generalists where you see people being able to do multiple roles. And then in kind of level 6 or later on, you see people lean more towards specialization and having special experts per role. The next two are easy. The next layer is work volume. And this is a visual graph that kind of depicts using kind of like hours and people hours, how much work is involved in each level. So like, for instance, you'll see in like level 2, you see this bump. That's essentially because in level 2 is where we're actually redesigning, rebuilding our comms platforms. And that takes a little bit more extra work to get off the ground. And then you start kind of coasting after that. The next layer is business outcomes that we put on top of that. And this is, we thought that this is really important, even as a visual, to make sure and depict that everything we do must net out to some kind of business outcome, right? We're not doing content or communications just to communicate. We're not sending out an email just for views and click-throughs. We're sending emails to create some kind of action that's going to lead to a business outcome, right? Things like it's reduce manufacturing injuries or reduce turnover or increase sales. Whatever that business outcome is, we need to tie ourselves to that, right? And that's what the model is in a nutshell. Greg, does that make sense? Did I kind of miss anything?
No, I think you got it. Let me ask you a question. Like, what happens if someone looked at this and doesn't necessarily feel they fit into one of these levels?
That's right. That can happen. And so we thought about that in terms of alignment. And we see alignment as a way as like, how close are each of the layers together when you kind of assess yourself on this, right? So I think when there's disparity between like where you are at each of these levels, it could lead to certain misconceptions on expectations, where whether it's between you and within your team or between you and leadership or other business functions, we just have to look at that because expectations might not be aligned. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So the first one is very aligned, and this is pretty clear cut and dry. From all of these layers, you're kind of in the same place. And I think this is the best scenario for leveling up, right? The next one is partially aligned, and this is a scenario where like you're kind of closely aligned to each other, but not exactly. Like in this scenario, your achievement is at level 3 and your team is at a level 4. And this is something that you may want to look at because it might arise situations like, you know, your team might be better utilized, or they might be able to do something to help you move that achievement to level 4, right? So it kind of puts some understanding into the mix. And then you have not aligned, and this is where there's kind of a larger disparity here. In this scenario, your team is at a level 1 and achievement and work volume is at level 4. And you know, something dramatic might have happened in the organization or whatnot, but here's a situation where you could say that, you know what, based on what the expectation is of the team, I need more resources. So it's a way to kind of just set those expectations correctly by seeing where your alignment is there. Right? And just to put it more into context, we've taken it a step further and created an assessment for you all to basically see where you are. And you could find this assessment at maturity.localwisdom.com. Like Greg said, all of this will be shared in emails and whatnot for later. But just to show you what that looks like really quickly, I'm going to exit out of this and just bring in my browser here. And so when you click on maturity, or when you go to maturity.localwisdom.com, you'll get to this page. Just to note, an overview of everything can be found by clicking on this link. That'll take you to a blog post where we have all the information and available to download and whatnot. But the assessment itself is just 9 multiple choice questions, right? And basically at the end of it, you get to a results page, which basically gives you your level that we see you in. It gives you some context on that level, including some good news about that level, some not so good news about that level. It tells you where you are aligned. It lets you know if you're very aligned, partially aligned, or not aligned, and just gives you where each of your layers scored. And it gives you a few steps on what to do next. And obviously, my company is here to help you. So if you need to get in contact, or if we could help you in any way, we're here for you there. Yeah, does that make sense, Greg? I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
It certainly does to me. I think what's interesting for everyone to know, right, is that you can look at this assessment as an individual assessment of yourself, and assuming you're a communicator, right, and or an extension, maybe you manage digital signage and you're not on the comms team, whatever representation of communicator you are, right, communicating with an audience. You could look at this as a self-assessment. And the way we would recommend looking at it is a company assessment, right? So, you could take it yourself, you could take it with your small or medium-sized comms team, or you can extend this out to others in the organization, from leaders. So Pinaki and I will talk about this in a moment here in terms of what our experiences are. There's pros and cons to sort of keeping it to yourself or bringing others in. But again, the overall change isn't really just for you. The final outcome is your entire business has transformed, right? Comms is so important to the business, and you've been able to enable the business and decentralize so that comms is actually driving the business. So to get to that, you're going to have to bring others in. You're going to have to align around this. So this model, essentially, the assessment helps you sort of find where you're all at, right? So maybe some of you take it and you're at level 1 or 2, and others take it and think they're at 4 and 5, and you're not done there. It's that discussion together, like, why do you think we're there? You think we're creating this kind of content? We're not creating this kind of content. Or maybe you don't know that we are creating this kind of content or achieving these kind of goals. So I think it's not just take it and you know where you're at. It's take it and discuss it. And better to sort of be candid about it, right, where you're not, so you can chart your course to where you need to go.
That's 100% true. I think, like, I think people support a world they help create. So the more people you bring on, the better. And just like Greg said, this was meant to be kind of macro all the way down to micro. So yes, like corporate comms can use this for their internal comms, but also like employee resource groups or small business functions and office locations could use it to build out their comms function.
So before we maybe go into some of our experiences there, let's do our third and final poll here, which is relevant. So I am launching this right now, everyone. Give you about 30 seconds again to answer this. All right. Well, we have mostly everyone who's answered here, and I think the winner is often busy, which means your plate is full and you probably don't have a lot of time for other stuff. So decentralizing makes a whole lot of sense here for you. So Pinaki, who do you think should take the assessment? What's the angle on an individual versus a group of people doing this?
Yeah, I think like you said, it kind of works in almost like both ways, right? Like as I think I think the what you kind of described the most is the discussions that you can have with it, right? I think it should be individuals. It should be within your team. You should include leadership. Why not include any business partners that you actually work with and support? Because like this model is not only a way for you to plan how you could build your team and build your function moving forward, but it's a reference point that you could all look at and talk about and see where you align and not align. So, you can use it with your leaders or other business partners to take the assessment or walk through the model together to see where do you agree or where do you not agree, where are the points of disparity, and have a candid conversation about that. Because at the end of the day, we can use it to set expectations and really get what we need to level up.
Yeah, I've had similar experience. It's interesting because it's perceived differently. Like everyone thinks this is valuable. I think first and foremost, everyone thinks about me, myself, right? So where do I stand in this assessment first? And maybe depending on what kind of leadership support and buy-in you actually have for your communications program and strategy, it depends. Maybe if you don't have a lot of leadership buy-in there yet, you could look at it like maybe you start here, get to some of this improvement, right? You're a little bit more data driven now, and now you've got some irrefutable data to bring leadership on this journey with you, right? Because they listen to data more than anything else. Or you could look at it the other way, where you start it by yourself or your small team, and then you sort of get them on board right from the beginning, because the way you score and the way they score is likely going to be very different. They probably have a lot of assumptions or other areas of the business too. So it gives you this opportunity to align, right? And realize where your gaps are and bring that together. Versus I've worked with companies who just start in comms, or maybe it's comms and HR, or maybe it's comms and HR and IT doing it together. But the best of the situations, when I've worked with customers who want to really make this change and they have that support, right? And they've purchased this kind of technology like Corbett to sort of transform and help with all of that, then generally getting the C office, whoever you can, chief HR officer, chief communications officer, the higher level you get there, rest assured there's going to be disparity and differences in everybody's scores. And that's kind of what you want to get out of this, because you immediately realize that alignment factor, right? You're not necessarily aligned. So generally they'll take that. We'll come back and we'll talk about it, right? And they might score themselves higher, and then we'll ask a few questions, and they'll be like, "Oh, you're probably right." It always ends up resulting going backwards to the lower scores, because again, you're being candid. This is not just where I'm at. This is where my organization is at. So if I'm trying to decentralize and get my company to be driven by communications, we have a lot of work to do. And that's where I think the benefit from the beginning, I would recommend bring in all the relevant parties, leaders, C office you can, find that misalignment to get to alignment. Because then the most important part that we're going to talk about now is what do? You've assessed yourself, you've aligned on where that assessment is. Padaki, how do you take action on these things?
Yeah, totally. Let me share my screen, but and as I kind of do that, I totally am in agreement with you. I think like even from our standpoint, when we go into meetings with like new clients or potential prospects, we're always saying to the comms folks, hey, let's bring IT in, let's bring leadership in. So because, you know, if there isn't alignment, then things go wrong. Things go wrong quickly. And so we want to make sure we are all on the same page as we're moving forward together. And I think just if I add one kind of tip in how you use this would be not as something that you're doing for yourself, like I'm trying to raise, you know, I'm trying to get a promotion or I'm trying to do this for myself. We want to couch this as this is what we are trying to achieve together for a greater good. And I think kind of like a quick analogy, I was talking to a former mentee of mine, and you know, she developed a new role for herself at her organization by not saying I'm looking for a promotion, by saying here's a void that I see that I have a plan on how to fill. Here's the plan, and by the way, I can do this for you if you like. Immediately got it. So it's just kind of couching the conversation in a different way. But let me share my screen again. Do I need to access to change screens? Nope.
You should be able
I
to
do have it. There we go. I'm back on. So I'm going to bring my presentation back in. Cool. And so we did this. So like we basically created a roadmap plan based on this maturity model. So let's assume that we're at like level 1 right now. What we basically did was create a plan that maps out all of the achievements on the left, like comm strategy, production process, editorial calendar, so on. And we've mapped out all of the steps that we're going to do quarter by quarter in such a way where we could go from level 1 to level 4 in 12 months. But this is the idea. So by understanding where you are and where you want to go, you could use something like this to just kind of plan out the action steps and what you need to do to get there.
And you generally find, right, that a lot comes out of this. You're going to say, oh boy, like, you know, there's 3,000 things that we need to get done and change with here. And obviously you can't do all that at once, right? So I think when you look at those achievements and your goals, because again, goals is the foundation of all of this, then, you know, which ones do you prioritize at first? And what are those actions? So when you spread that across the year, quarter by quarter, for example, you know you need to be data driven, you don't have the tools to be data driven, then you know, maybe Q1 is your education on, you know, your goals and your desired outcomes and where you want to take this and your search for that technology. And then, you know, Q2, you start measuring a little bit and so on and so forth, right? So I think that the reality is you gotta be able to track all the achievements and where you want to get to and place them across the year at your speed, right? You know, every company, every person's only ready for so much at a time. But by plotting out this course, then you get things done and then you move on to the next set, right? And the next set, and you've got this constant sort of set of actions and accomplishments to address there. So I think, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Greg, I was just going to say, just to echo that, and on top of that, just you have to do this in your own speed, because while you're working on this, there's the everyday communications that are coming through your team, right? So that has to be managed at the same time, which is why it's all a juggling act.
Yes, yes. Perhaps one of those things is you need to hire one more person. So I know we've got, you know, a little under 15 minutes left here, and we've got some questions coming in. So I thought it'd be a good time to sort of maybe take some of these questions and answer them. So I'll read some of these off. So one of the first questions that came in was, I noticed that the metrics decisions is an achievement at level 5. Are you suggesting that we don't measure our communications until we're at level 5?
That's a really good question, especially because we're all very data driven here and everything like that. And just to be clear, let me bring up that, maybe I could just bring up that screen just so to give context as to what what this question is talking about, right? So, well, right here, metrics that guide decisions is an achievement at kind of level 5. So I'm not saying that you should not measure. So you should measure your comms all across here. The point about focus is that it kind of happens in metrics in level 5, because unless you have your set of communication channels that are set, unless you have like consistency in the way you're communicating and you're able to target content, you're not going to be able to have a set of metrics that are going to be standard every time you look at it, right? And that's what we're trying to get to. In order to have metrics to guide decisions, we want to look at the same type of data using the same algorithms over and over again to see trends, right? And that's the point of being able to focus on this towards the end. So you can look at, how many people opened it, how many people did this, and I think you should throughout all of this and beyond. But when you kind of come to creating a framework that's going to be set and standard, that's what it comes in after you get these things achieved. Does that make sense? I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, you got kind of, again, have to have goals and desired outcomes and create content related to that so that you have a system to measure it. So if measuring communications is going to be new to you, then start with the goals and do all these other things, and then get to that place where now you can measure it. Another question. We sort of answered this, but we can go back into it here. What are the pros and cons of doing the assessment just as me versus with my comms team or others too? And I think, again, this comes down to how ready are you to be candid and open to both your strengths and your I wouldn't call it weakness, but your areas of opportunity for growth, right? So if you are worried that other people, shouldn't see this, I would recommend don't be worried about that. Let your guard down. Right? It's okay. If you have a plan and can bring this forth, you're going to be the hero in the end anyway, right? So, ultimately, the more candid you are, the more your plan can help solve for that.
Yeah, there's a few use cases, right? And that maybe this will help you determine who to involve, right? Like I see this could be used as a sanity check, right? Just to check, is this right? Am I in the right place, right? Like, am I poised for success? And that might be something that's just internal for you, because a lot of times, what did the poll said? We're kind of not chaotic, but one step below that. So a lot of times we deliver on our promises, but sometimes it's at the detriment of our home and work-life balance. So we could use this to say, wait a minute, is that right? And like you said, I think to have conversations with leaders, and to be able to provoke conversations and to be able to advocate for yourself using a common thing to look at. So yeah, I think based on whether you want to just get your own mind organized, to getting certain leadership organized, to getting teams and other larger audiences organized, I think you could almost kind of go at it kind of step by step, perhaps.
Yeah, and there's a few more questions. One of them that is almost building off of that last one was, what if I'm not part of the corporate comms team? Does this still apply to me? And I think the answer is absolutely yes, right? If you have some responsibility, whether aligned to corporate comms or not, for using some channel like signage or mobile or whatnot, intranet that you own, email, then yeah, this applies, right? This is, again, like about communicating and achieving those goals and driving engagement on the other side of that. So it would apply to you.
It does. And we built this thinking about it not as necessarily as an enterprise-wide assessment. And I think it could work both ways. Like, this can be an enterprise-wide assessment, but it could be just an assessment of a smaller comms team. Like, yeah, if you're part of, like you said before, like a employee resource group, or in charge of like communications for this office location, this could apply to you.
Another one, what is the best way that you have found to gather leader input? I'm assuming that if you're trying to get input from your leaders, right? I think first, is it their strategy or yours, right? So what kind of input are you trying to gather, right? So, again, what are the goals and objectives here? So if you're trying, in this case, let's say you're meeting with a chief communications officer, and you're trying to, get them to, see the value in a new technology platform or something like that. There's a lot of discovery questions, right? About like, what are their goals? Can they reach everybody? If not, why not? What's the challenge with reaching everyone? Well, a technology platform can solve for that. How many different ways are you publishing content? Do you want efficiency in that, right? What if you had one place to do all that? It's a long-winded answer, and happy to follow up with the person who asked that. But ultimately, I think, leaders need this help, right? Not all of communication leaders out there, or IT leaders or HR leaders, have this same vision, have these same goals. Doesn't mean they don't want them. If you can help create that vision for them and extract those goals out of them, extract what success looks like to them, how you get the attention of that C office, then you can start to build a plan and use this assessment to sort of, level set and align.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd echo that and say, like, I think when you want input for leadership, I think it's time you would couch or position the need for that input as a benefit for them as opposed to a benefit for you. So, for example, if you come to me and say, hey, I have some questions for you that'll help me do my job, versus, hey, I have some questions for you that'll help us achieve this goal, that's a different type of mindset that I'm going to come into the situation with. So think about that, and think about it in terms of, hey, I have some questions for you. I would love to get your input, and this input will help us to achieve something better, something that that leader would be interested in achieving. Or you could use that questioning to learn what that leader is looking to achieve.
Exactly. One last question that came in was, how can we best contact you, Pinaki, to get your support or consult on this assessment? So with the email that we'll be sending out as a follow-up, we'll also be doing a blog post next week to sort of recap this at Corbett. So look to our website for that information and how to get in contact with Pinaki. And Pinaki, do you want to just say the URL one more time of the assessment? Because if you take the assessment, right, it'll come to Pinaki and he can reach out to you as well too.
Yeah, correct. The URL is maturity.localwisdom.com. And yeah, once you kind of actually fill out the survey and whatnot, all the way at that need help section, there's a button where you could actually book a meeting.
Well, we very much thank you all for attending here today. We hope this was helpful. Just a few things to leave you with in terms of key takeaways here. What will your next steps be is what we are asking of you here. So if you decide that this particular maturity model is right for you and your company, reach out to Pinaki, use the assessment, like get started that way. And use that to just do a candid assessment. Maybe it's just you again starting with this, your team or others, to assess your current state and your capabilities. That will help you through this particular model to identify your strengths and areas for improvement. And you can use the roadmap or some other model you might have to sort of plot out your actions so you can keep advancing. And our ultimate recommendation is never stop doing this. So maybe every 90 days or 6 months, you're going to reassess yourself. How far did you get with your actions? What do you need to reprioritize, and just keep striving for that, reaching to get through that comms transformation. This is a continuous thing that can always, have continuous improvement. So thank you all very much for your time today, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.
Oh yeah, thank you all again, and again, thank you, Greg, and thank you, Corbett. Really appreciate it.
Take care, everyone. Have a great day.
Best to you all.